Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. And we have a really great guest, someone who's probably going to answer some of the questions our focus groups have been talking about for no, a long time. Monica Eaton is president of a company. I'm going to let Monica tell you all about it after she tells us a little bit about her personal background and how she came to lead such a, to me, an important company.
Well, thank you, Don. Thanks for having me. Great to be on the show. As you introduced me, my name is Monica Eaton, and I founded Chargebacks 911. So the name kind of says it all. What do? We do something with chargebacks, which is a dispute that happens when consumers either don't receive a product or you have some issue and you contact your bank instead of the retailer to get a refund. So, a little bit about me and how this company started. I have a background in consumer behavioral technology, and I guess in 2008, that's kind of when this whole idea started. But I didn't even know it. I was a merchant. I was an online merchant, and I wanted to compete with eBay. I wanted to build a marketplace, and I had this technology background, and I thought I could just build a website and they would come, right? The world was expanding, and I thought it would be a lot easier. Well, it was super hard. I failed my way to success. But there was one obstacle that I could never quite crack, which was chargebacks. And one thing led to another. I tried everything possible. I hired consultants. And at this point, so imagine, this is over a decade ago. This is like 15 years ago. And you would go to Google, search for the word chargebacks. There was nothing. I mean, nothing. I would ask people, what do you do with chargebacks? And I would just get told, you shouldn't talk about that word. It's actually a taboo. Don't tell anyone about it. It's something bad. Just refund more customers. So push came to shove. And, it wouldn't matter how much I tried to. I finally figured out, how to grow this business. And month after month, I would get ready to celebrate success. And then all of a sudden, my bank account would get drained by unexpected chargebacks. And, I was really facing a pretty nightmare situation because as a merchant, as a retailer, all that I wanted to do is grow my business, create more customers, improve the relationships with my customers, sell more products, and not worry about the handful of customers that somehow filed a chargeback that I didn't even know what the consequence was or how devastating this could have been. And so I couldn't figure out how to solve the problem with every single solution out there, which there wasn't very many to be sure. And I ended up doing what most people would think is common sense, but at the time it seemed like nobody did it. And I surveyed each and every customer that filed a chargeback. And I also surveyed customers from friends of mine who were also retailers. So I could really amass a terrific amount of data to understand exactly what's causing these chargebacks, what's causing my customers and others to contact their bank and complain about something or get a refund or reship a product instead of contacting the retailer. And I found something fascinating. In fact, the majority of the problems that I had with chargebacks were my own fault, which was a relief because it meant I could solve it. I had all sorts of issues that were going on. My shipping and fulfillment company wasn't sending products out. I thought they were. I had, fraud going on, credit card fraud. I didn't know enough about how to run fraud filters. And you name it, I made the mistake. And I also found that a large number of consumers actually didn't even know they filed a chargeback. When they contacted their bank, they just didn't recognize the transaction and they just asked for information. They had no idea that they filed a chargeback. So, learning all these lessons, I wrote the first program and codified 106 different errors, and that became what I used to help really understand what the propensity was for chargebacks. And this was a necessary evil, an obstacle that was really prohibiting my growth. So solve that problem. I thought, oh my gosh, thank goodness now I can finally focus on what I'm most passionate about, which has nothing to do with chargebacks, and it's totally growing my business. And then something amazing happened. I started getting calls from the banks that I did business with. And mind you, these are banks that had closed my merchant processing account because I had too many chargebacks. And they started referring other retailers that were having similar problems with chargebacks. And one of the retailers happened to be a pretty major big box brand and a name that everybody would know. And that was when I thought, I think there might be an idea for some sort of chargeback company, a consulting company. So I came up with the name Chargebacks 911, created a website, and obviously with a name like Chargebacks 911, it's a pretty aggressive name. It doesn't sound like a name that ever had any thought of doing business with corporate America, in the payments industry, in banks, with institutions, because it was a name that from my own heart, what I wanted is to dial 911 and get rescued from chargeback hell. and and so this was really created in a way out of rage in the industry, because I wanted other retailers to know that they could do something about this nuisance and they could really understand what was causing the problem and get educated about it. And it's one of those crazy stories how this company has come to fruition. Shortly after, I was contacted by the New York Times, then the Wall Street Journal, and needless to say, I saw, I'm going to build a chargeback platform. And that was 12 years ago in 2011. Fasting forward, about 6 years ago, we expanded. So we're an international company and expanded into Europe. I moved overseas. Our headquarters is still in Tampa Bay, Florida, but I moved to London to expand our company there. And today we also provide platform technology for processing chargebacks and helping to resolve transaction disputes. And we provide these solutions to some of the world's largest financial institutions and banks, as well as retailers all over the world.
Well, and your website before we go any further?
So our website is chargebacks911.com.
Okay. But now let's back up a minute. What exactly do you do? Yes, you charge backs. Do you become the intermediator between the customer and the bank, or what do you do?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we provide. So when a dispute, when a consumer contacts their bank and they raise an issue with a particular transaction, then a dispute is filed and it can turn into a chargeback. And then the problem is it's a very arduous process that involves lots of different workflows and documentation, and there's specific codes that have to do. There's all sorts of reasons for disputes and chargebacks, and every type of reason has a separate type of rules. And it's kind of like, I would think of this kind of like payroll taxes. And kind of what we do for the chargeback world is sort of like what payroll companies did before. It was everyone used their payroll clerks. I mean, I remember the days, probably not many people that are much younger than me, but I remember the days when there was no such thing as using a payroll company. You didn't have any software. You had to hire someone that was a payroll clerk, and they were an expert at knowing all the taxes everywhere, all over. And then you printed these checks, and it was very manual, and payroll was like a very stressful thing. And this was all they did. Well, then you got software, and the software actually managed all the rules, all the changes, all the different things that you need to pay attention to. And your payroll clerk now, that was just your accountant, your CFO. They enter in a few numbers, it does all the calculations, it sends all the paperwork, and now you have things digitized. That's what our software does in a nutshell. Is we take a very complex manual process with lots of changes. You have Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, all these different payment methods, and they constantly change. They're very dynamic. They're different in every type of with different payment methods and with different banks. And we provide a software platform. We're a technology provider that helps streamline that entire process and really deliver a very efficient solution similar to the payroll industry.
Okay, but your client is the bank, not the small business.
Our client is both. So we provide the platform technology for banks, for financial institutions, as well as retailers, because retailers have the same types of challenge. It's a different challenge, but as a retailer, then a retailer has the burden. They may do business with several banks, and they have the burden of receiving all of their chargebacks, and then they need to respond to each of those chargeback requests, because they have to be able to provide information that goes back to the consumer. And many times chargebacks are filed accidentally because consumers don't recognize what shows up on their credit card statement. This has probably happened to all of us. The world has been growing so rapidly. Technology continues to evolve. And frankly, our systems can't keep pace with all of the changes. So oftentimes we'll see something like, I saw a payment the other day. I thought, you know what? I haven't been to Arkansas. And I realized it's an online payment. It was an online merchant that I bought from, but the only thing that I saw was Arkansas. So innocent mistakes happen, and it's important that retailers can test those types of mistakes so that they don't end up suffering, the debit for the otherwise they're providing a refund and they won't get their money back.
Okay, Monica, well, let's go back. I'm a small business. I'm doing $300,000 a year, most of it online. Okay, um, would I be the one for your service, or would I hope that my bank has the service?
So you would be the one for our service, and you could sign up with a subscription and utilize our service. And chances are your bank may also offer our service, and that is white labeled. So it really it depends.
Okay, well, let's say my average return is $19, just for
Uh-huh.
example. Well, how much do you charge me to take care of that?
So if you are a small business and you said your average transaction is $19, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So in that case, you probably don't have a large number of chargeback requests, and you probably are using an online CRM system, maybe Magento, maybe Keep, one of these different systems. So probably the best fit would be that you would engage with a subscription model, in which case you would pay, I don't know, maybe $80 a month, maybe less, depending on how much volume you have. And then you can select, to take advantage of a few plugins. So that way, all of the data ends up getting pre-populated, and essentially it's fully automated. So that way you still have control because it's your data and you're the user. But we make the process a lot more efficient. Today you would probably have to wait to get those chargebacks by fax or probably in the mail. You'd have to open up each one. Chances are you have a few days once you receive it. So utilizing our software, you have everything delivered to you in one portal, and you can review information, you can upload additional information, and you can monitor your results right through the software.
Well, let's say I want to return an item to you. Um, my assumption is you have an authorization to mail it back to you. Do you also do that? I know Amazon right now. I just returned something to Amazon, and they sent me a form, something to print out and then bring to a local Kohl's. But that's not what we're talking about. We're
Yeah,
talking.
sorry. So no. So what we would be doing is, as a consumer, let's say that you wanted to return an item and you want to return the item and you contact Amazon, and Amazon says, you know what, Don, you cannot return this item. And you're past the point, and now this is what happens. Now you're thinking, well, I don't have any need for this, and I really don't want it. What can I do with it? I missed the return window. So some consumers are tempted and they use the chargeback process in a in a kind of a bad way. So because it's been getting exploited. And so if you were a dishonest consumer, then in this case, you may contact your bank. Maybe you bank at Capital One, and you'd say, you know what? Actually, I never received the product from Amazon.
Oh,
Well, you know you received it, you couldn't return it, and so now you tell your bank, I didn't receive it. Well, your bank files a chargeback. They charge Amazon. Amazon receives that chargeback request, and then they respond and say, you know what? We did deliver this to Don, and by the way, here's a picture of this product in his doorstep, and also here's evidence he called us. He tried to return it, but he was out of time. And so now the consumer, so you would not end up getting to keep the refund that you were given initially for filing a chargeback. Instead, that money would go back to Amazon. Does that make sense?
yes. No, that's where I was getting to because what we saw in a recent focus group, but was the fact that people were receiving the item and still demanding a refund, and
Yes.
they didn't know how to deal with it. That's why we asked you on this program.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's so many different terms for this in the industry. The one that I think describes this issue the best is really cyber shoplifting, because that's effectively what ends up happening. But I do think, and we've done enough studies to understand, the majority of consumers would never shoplift. That they're honest, they want to do the right thing, but there's just not enough education to understand that as a consumer, if you contact your bank to get a refund instead of the retailer, actually the retailer gets a penalty, they have an irreversible negative statistic, they get all of their money debited, and it's a real pain.
Mm,
It's very painful. It's not at all the same as if you would have contacted the retailer and just asked them for a refund.
yes. Well, what happens? It's just goods, but for instance, subscriptions. I just found out recently that I was being charged by a major publishing house for the last year for something that I never used, and I only found out because they separated out the bills for the first time. But you don't do subscriptions, do you?
Actually, so chargebacks are will can be applied to any type of transaction. So whether it's subscriptions, whether it's tangible products, travel, airlines, it doesn't really matter. But you have to keep in mind that there are certain rules that govern what rights the consumer has to file a chargeback, and the rights that the merchant has as well, that pertain to whether or not that whether it's a subscription, and whether or not as a consumer you're going to recover funds through filing a chargeback. So for example, with your example, you have a year's worth of subscription payments that you forgot about. Now, it may seem like you should get a refund for this, but if you forgot about it, then actually it's probably going to be your fault, because you shouldn't forget about it. You should take more care to make sure that you know exactly what you're paying for, because the retailer in this case, even if you weren't using your subscription, they've budgeted thinking that you were using your subscription, and you could have canceled at any number of times. So in this case, what I would always suggest doing is contacting the retailer, because chances are that retailer wants to keep you as a customer. Customers are always right at the end of the day, and sometimes we forget about that. So if you contact the retailer and say, you know what, How much can you give me as a refund? I didn't realize this. I still want to be a customer. Who knows? I've seen retailers make exceptions. We all have. Maybe they'll even give you 6 months of refunds, or
Well,
the next 6 months for free.
right.
Who knows?
In this case, they gave me 3 months, which was more
Well,
than
then,
okay.
yeah, that's even better.
Well, let's talk about it from the standpoint of small business. Well, what should be the metric? Should it be 1%, 2% chargebacks, or do you have ideas about when people should really look at this thing?
Sure, sure. So as any business, you have to take a look. You have to consider what are the things that are going to create the most risk for chargebacks. So if you're a small business and you sell any type of subscription, well, you're going to get more chargebacks. And the reason why is because as consumers, we like convenience.
Mhm.
And you know what? We forget about things. And for a small subscription fee, we do lots of trials. And our bank sometimes is easier and more convenient to contact than the small business. So just expect more chargebacks. It doesn't mean that consumers are being devious. It's just the way that it works.
Mm.
Secondly, you're going to get more chargebacks if you sell anything that is redeemed in the future. So, for example, let's say that you sell a vacation package. Well, there's chances that something could come up. There's a sickness, there's a car accident or whatever, and now even if you have a no refund policy, that was a pretty painful purchase for consumers. It's generally a high ticket item, and so there's also going to be higher chargeback risk on those types of purchases. And then last but not least, any type of luxury goods, or anything that can be easily resold, and like whether it's watches, purses, jewelry, computers, things that you can sell on eBay. Those are also, really indicators of high chargebacks,
Mm.
because obviously, a lot of consumers may order these products and then try to get away with filing a chargeback so they get something for free and then they could sell it later on. So taking those things into account, now next piece of the equation to kind of understand what type of chargeback problem should you anticipate. So establish where's your risk. Then you have to look at what's your method that you use to get sales. Well, if you get sales from all of your friends and family, chances are you're never going to have a chargeback. But if you get sales and it's all organic through social media, you'll probably have a few chargebacks. Now, if you use an advertising firm, and even especially if you pay commission to this advertising firm and you use something called affiliate marketing,
Uh,
or you're going to get a lot of chargebacks because you have individuals that are representing yourself selling your product that have incentive to maybe push the envelope. And so you need to be cautious and make sure that you're really paying attention to what's going on, and make sure that you also realize that's going to create more chargebacks. And then last but not least is what type of sales you have. So we went through advertising, like how do you get your sales? We went what types of products you sell, and then last is what kind of method do you use? So do you have a store where it's contactless and it's a chip and pin and you only sell to customers that are present? If so, you're going to have a pretty low chargeback rate because it's difficult for a customer to say it wasn't me.
mhm.
They had their card, right? If you sell on an app, you're going to have a higher chargeback rate. And because chances are there's also subscriptions, but it does have a device ID. So that's an identity piece of information. Less chargebacks than e-commerce, but more chargebacks than store present. And then last but not least, of course, is e-commerce.
Mm.
If you only have an e-commerce store, then you're open 24/7. and and you also have all sorts of responsibilities and expectations that, let's face it, have been set by the Amazons of the world. So you need to recognize when your consumers order something they expect 24/7 customer support. They expect delivery the very next day. And there's a very high bar for those standards. You have to be, cautious, or make sure that you have, a lot of follow up with customer service, confirmation emails. But there's all those factors that really have to be taken into account, in addition to all the different things that you do to communicate with your customers and perform the service to support whatever products and service you sell. If you do a great job on all of that, you're going to reduce your chargeback risk. And then everything else kind of adds little piece by time. So as a small business owner, don't be ashamed if you get a chargeback. Everybody gets chargebacks. Expect it, get educated. I would always recommend utilize a solution that helps, resolve some of that expertise that you need, so that it takes the guesswork out of the equation in terms of understanding reason codes and all the industry jargon changes that happen with chargeback rules. And as a rule of thumb, make sure that you really pay attention to understanding not just how many chargebacks you have. You should always be below 1%. Again, depending on your business, if you look at the count of sales versus the count of chargebacks in a given month. But I think what's most important for businesses, especially small businesses that are starting out and getting involved in line, is that they pay attention to, what caused their chargeback. And not enough small businesses look at chargebacks as an asset. They only look at it as a cost of doing business. And the reality is, if you take the time as a small business owner to investigate each and every chargeback, you're probably going to learn something about your business that's going to either save you money or make you money. You're going to, you can use this as learning, and that's going to be a lot more valuable in trial and error savings than it would be to just, write off your chargeback as a cost of doing business and ignore some of that feedback that you can get from learning. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time together. But one last time, your website for Monica.
Chargebacks, sure. Chargebacks911.com.
Well, I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope our audience did as well. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Don. Have a great day.